My life, before all the noise, was a meticulously organized blueprint. Every line, every angle, every shade of gray in my carefully curated world had its place. As an architect, I didn't just design buildings, I designed my existence with the same precision. My apartment, a sun-drenched sanctuary on the second floor of a charming, if slightly dated, pre-war building, was an extension of this philosophy. The quiet hum of the city outside was a comforting backdrop, never an intrusion. My mornings began with a specific type of herbal tea, followed by the silent ritual of reviewing design drafts, the only sounds the rustle of papers and the gentle click of my ergonomic keyboard. Evenings were for classical music, a good book, or perhaps sketching out new ideas, the calm punctuated only by the occasional distant siren. It was perfect, structured, predictable. Then Dorothy moved in upstairs. It started subtly, a new thump here, a different melody there, something I could initially dismiss as the natural settling of a new tenant. But it escalated. Within a week, my once tranquil mornings were punctuated by what sounded like a herd of wildebeest migrating across my ceiling. The evenings, once reserved for contemplation, became a jarring medley of heavy bass lines, what I assumed was a drum set being dismantled piece by piece, and the occasional, surprisingly off-key, vocal exercises. Sleep, once a reliable friend, became a distant, taunting memory. I'd lie there, staring at the ceiling, the vibrations of some unknown rock anthem seeping into my bones, transforming my serene bedroom into a chaotic concert hall. My carefully constructed world began to fray at the edges. The delicate lines of my architectural drawings seemed to blur, my focus elusive. Migraines, once a rarity, became a frequent, throbbing guest behind my eyes, their intensity directly proportional to the decibel level emanating from above. I tried noise-canceling headphones, but even those couldn't entirely muffle the deep thrum that resonated through the building's old bones. My patience, usually a sturdy foundation, started to crumble. It wasn't just the noise, it was the utter disregard it represented for anyone else's peace, for anyone else's life. I never actually saw her, not really. Just glimpses. A flash of bright, almost electric blue hair disappearing around the corner of the stairwell one afternoon as I was retrieving my mail. Another time, a pair of worn, studded combat boots, accompanied by a swirl of dark fabric, vanishing into the apartment door directly above mine. The faint, metallic scent of something sweet and smoky, like incense mixed with an unfamiliar perfume, occasionally lingered in the hallway after she'd passed. These fleeting observations only intensified my frustration. Who was this elusive, vibrant, chaotic creature who had so carelessly bulldozed into my quiet existence? And why did she seem so utterly oblivious to the havoc she was wreaking on my sanity? The simmering resentment grew, a slow, burning ember in the quiet hearth of my increasingly agitated mind. I was close to losing it, I really was. The breaking point arrived on a Tuesday night, after a particularly grueling day at the office. A deadline had loomed, demanding every ounce of my concentration, leaving me utterly drained. All I craved was the blessed silence of my apartment, a hot bath, and the promise of undisturbed sleep. Instead, I walked into an auditory assault. The ceiling above me vibrated with a relentless, thumping beat that felt less like music and more like a tribal drum circle had taken root directly overhead. It was a chaotic, insistent rhythm, accompanied by what sounded suspiciously like a bass guitar solo that echoed through the very floorboards. My carefully cultivated composure, the steel-reinforced concrete of my emotional stability, snapped. A white-hot anger, unfamiliar in its intensity, surged through me. My hands clenched at my sides, my jaw tight. This wasn't just noise anymore, it was an invasion. I didn't think. I simply acted. My feet carried me, propelled by sheer indignation, out of my apartment and up the single flight of stairs. Each step resonated with my rising fury. I stood before her door, a dark, heavy oak slab that seemed to vibrate with the infernal racket behind it. My fist, a little unsteady, knocked sharply once, twice, 3 times, each rap an exclamation point to my simmering rage. The music, surprisingly, didn't stop. I knocked again, harder this time, a frantic, desperate attempt to pierce through the sonic wall. After what felt like an eternity, the music abruptly cut out, leaving a ringing silence that felt almost deafening. The door opened a crack, then wider, revealing her. Dorothy. She stood framed in the doorway, a striking figure against the soft glow of an unseen lamp. Her hair, the vibrant electric blue I had glimpsed, was pulled back in a loose, artfully messy ponytail, revealing an intricate silver earring in one ear. Her eyes, a piercing shade of hazel, widened slightly in surprise, then softened with a flicker of something I couldn't quite decipher. They were intelligent eyes, framed by dark lashes, and held a surprising depth. Her skin was pale, almost luminous, contrasting sharply with the deep purple of her lipstick. She wore a faded band t-shirt, the kind that spoke of countless concerts and ripped jeans. A silver chain, thin and delicate, was looped around her neck. There was an unapologetic vibrancy about her, a raw energy that was both captivating and, in that moment, utterly irritating. She was undeniably beautiful, in a wild, untamed way that was so utterly antithetical to everything I was. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice a low alto, surprisingly gentle despite the situation. My anger, though still simmering, faltered for a fraction of a second at the sight of her, her unexpected beauty momentarily disarming me. But the memory of my sleepless nights quickly reignited my resolve. "Help me?" My voice, usually calm and measured, came out sharper than I intended, laced with disbelief. "You can help me by not shaking my entire apartment building apart with your music?" My gesture encompassed her apartment, the ceiling, the very air vibrating around us. "I haven't had a decent night's sleep in weeks. I can barely concentrate at work. This has to stop." The words tumbled out, fueled by weeks of suppressed frustration. A shadow crossed her face, not of defensiveness, but something closer to genuine regret. She ran a hand through her blue hair, pushing a few stray strands from her forehead. "Oh, my God. I am so sorry, Karen." The use of my name, a simple courtesy, was unexpectedly jarring. I honestly didn't realize it was that bad. I usually keep my headphones on. I guess I got a little carried away tonight. "I'm truly sorry." Her gaze was direct, her expression earnest. There was no defiance, no argument, just a raw, unvarnished apology. Her sincerity, completely unexpected, took the wind out of my sails. I had braced myself for an argument, for defensiveness, for anything but this quiet contrition. I stood there, my chest still heaving slightly, the force of my anger slowly dissipating like steam. The unexpected beauty, the raw energy, now tinged with genuine remorse, created an odd cocktail of feelings within me. A part of me wanted to keep railing, to vent all the accumulated frustration, but another, quieter part was simply listening. Her hazel eyes, once just a piercing gaze, now seemed to hold a flicker of concern. "Well," I finally managed, my voice still a bit strained. "Just please, be more mindful." "I will," she promised, her voice still soft. "I really, truly will. I wouldn't want to be that neighbor." A faint, almost rueful smile touched her lips, a gesture that was surprisingly endearing. I simply nodded, a tight, curt movement, then turned and walked back down the stairs, the silence in the hallway feeling both unfamiliar and heavy. Back in my apartment, the quiet was no longer comforting, but unsettling. Her apology, her direct gaze, her unexpected beauty, they all lingered, creating an unfamiliar hum in the quiet corners of my mind. The anger had receded, but it had left something else in its wake, a strange, unwanted curiosity about the vibrant, chaotic woman upstairs, whose presence had somehow become more than just a source of noise. The days that followed my impromptu confrontation were different. The incessant thumping from upstairs ceased. Oh, I could still hear her, of course. Old buildings have a way of transmitting every creak and whisper. But now it was background noise, muted, almost polite. Instead of bass vibrations, I'd catch the gentle strumming of an acoustic guitar, sometimes a melodic vocal exercise, clearly practicing rather than performing. The cacophony had been replaced by a quiet, almost hesitant rhythm. I found myself noticing these changes. At first, it was with a grudging acknowledgement, a silent, finally. But then, a subtle shift occurred. My internal skepticism, a well-honed defense mechanism, began to soften. She was actually trying. Dorothy was making an effort. This observation, as simple as it was, chipped away at my rigid perception of her as merely the noisy neighbor. Our accidental encounters became more frequent, though always brief and tinged with a delicate awkwardness. In the hallway, reaching for the mail, or occasionally as I was leaving for work and she was heading out for what looked like a coffee run. "Morning, Karen," she'd offer, a slight smile on her lips, her hazel eyes meeting mine for a moment too long. Her hair was often a different color now, sometimes a deep, fiery red, sometimes a striking silver blonde, but her smile always held that same faint, rueful quality, as if she was still apologizing for the noise, even weeks later. She had a way of looking at me, a direct, unfiltered gaze, that made me feel seen. "Good morning, Dorothy," I'd reply, my voice a little stiffer than hers, still not entirely comfortable with the unexpected intimacy of our names. I began to notice the small details about her. The way her long, artistic fingers, often adorned with silver rings, would unconsciously tap a rhythm on her thigh as she waited for the elevator. Her clothes, always expressive, told a story, worn denim, graphic tees, sometimes a flowing, almost bohemian skirt paired with heavy boots. It was a stark contrast to my own minimalist wardrobe, a symphony of grays and blacks. Yet, there was an undeniable elegance to her style, a confident artistry. Her movements were fluid, almost dancer-like, and her laugh, when I occasionally heard it echo from her apartment or in the hallway, was a bright, unrestrained sound that seemed to chase away the shadows. One afternoon, I was struggling to pull open the stubbornly stuck mailroom door when I heard footsteps behind me. "Here, let me get that," Dorothy's voice, a warm current, offered. Before I could protest, she had effortlessly pulled the heavy door open, holding it for me with a strength I hadn't expected. Her arm brushed mine briefly as she did, and a faint, almost floral scent, mixed with that familiar subtle smokiness, enveloped me for a moment. It wasn't just physical strength. There was an undeniable kindness in her gesture, a simple, uncalculated act of help. "Oh, thank you," I said, feeling a warmth spread through my cheeks. I rarely accepted help, preferring to tackle challenges independently. This small interaction felt disproportionately significant. She just smiled, a genuine, easy smile that reached her eyes. "Anytime, Karen." Back in my apartment, the quiet no longer felt heavy with residual anger. Instead, a new, unfamiliar awareness began to bloom. I found myself thinking about Dorothy not just in terms of the noise she used to make, but as the woman with the vibrant hair and expressive eyes who had unexpectedly opened a door for me. Her genuine apology, her consistent efforts, her small acts of kindness, they were slowly, steadily, dissolving the carefully constructed walls I had unknowingly built around my initial impression of her. It was a strange, unsettling feeling, this growing curiosity, this budding appreciation for a person who was so utterly different from me. It was a lightness I hadn't realized I was missing, a subtle shift in the harmony of my own carefully composed life. And for the first time in a long while, it wasn't an unpleasant sensation at all. The accidental encounters began to feel less accidental, more like tiny, anticipated punctuation marks in my otherwise predictable days. We'd find ourselves sharing the elevator, or passing in the hallway just as one of us was leaving and the other returning. These brief moments, once filled with a cautious politeness, started stretching, blossoming into something more. One evening, I arrived home, my arms laden with heavy architectural models, intricate, delicate structures made of balsa wood and foam core that were far too cumbersome to manage alone. As I fumbled with my keys, trying to balance the unwieldy load, Dorothy's door opened. She was holding a small, brightly colored canvas, still wet with paint, and her fingers were smudged with hues of crimson and gold. "Need a hand with that, Karen?" she asked, her voice soft, her hazel eyes twinkling with amusement at my predicament. Before I could politely decline, as was my habit, she had already propped her canvas carefully against the wall and was gently taking the largest model from my precarious grasp. Her touch was light, careful, surprising me with its thoughtfulness. "Oh, thank you," I said, feeling a flush creep up my neck. They're a nightmare to transport." She held the model with genuine interest. "Wow, this is amazing. Did you design this?" Her gaze swept over the miniature building, admiring the clean lines and intricate details. There was no pretense, just genuine appreciation in her voice. "Yes, it's a proposal for a new community center," I explained, feeling a surge of pride at her interest. We carried the models into my apartment, the air between us crackling with an unexpected ease. As she placed the final model on my dining table, she lingered for a moment, tracing a finger lightly along a balsa wood beam. "It's beautiful, Karen. Really. You have an incredible eye." Her compliment felt warm, sincere, settling deep within me. I found myself smiling, a genuine, unforced smile. "Thank you. I actually really enjoy seeing your work too, Dorothy. The paintings I've glimpsed, they're so vibrant." That opened the door. We talked about art, about design, about the creative process. I explained the rigorous logic behind architectural forms, the balance between aesthetics and function. She spoke with passion about color, about emotion, about translating raw feeling onto canvas. We discovered a shared intellectual curiosity, a surprising common ground that bridged our outwardly disparate worlds. I found myself fascinated by her perspective, her ability to see the world in bold strokes of color and emotion, while she seemed intrigued by my dedication to precision and structure. Our conversations grew longer, stretching from minutes in the hallway to shared cups of coffee, sometimes in her apartment, which, while still eclectic, was surprisingly tidy, sometimes in mine, where she marveled at my collection of obscure architecture books. I learned about her band, a local rock group called the Neon Echoes, and her dreams of making art full-time. She learned about my dedication to sustainable design and my quiet aspiration to leave a lasting mark on the city's skyline.
There were so many small things.
The way her eyes would crinkle at the corners when she laughed at one of my dry observations. The thoughtful tilt of her head when I explained a complex design problem. The way she'd sometimes lean against my doorframe, just talking, making me feel utterly at ease. A subtle connection was forming, undeniable and potent. Our glances lingered, a beat longer than strictly necessary. Shared smiles felt significant, loaded with an unspoken understanding. I found myself anticipating our next accidental meeting, a lightness blossoming in my chest, a feeling that was both exhilarating and a little bit terrifying. This woman, who had once been the bane of my existence, was now becoming an unexpected, essential note in the evolving melody of my life. The city, usually a source of inspiration, seemed to conspire against me one particularly bleak afternoon. A critical project I had poured months into was unexpectedly stalled, caught in a web of bureaucratic red tape and budget cuts. The news had landed like a lead weight in my stomach. I returned to my apartment feeling utterly defeated, the meticulous blueprints of my professional life suddenly crumbling around me. My usual coping mechanisms, logic, planning, quiet contemplation, failed. I just wanted to retreat, to disappear into the quiet of my structured world, but even that felt invaded by the day's crushing disappointment. I probably looked a mess. My hair, usually pinned back with architectural precision, had escaped its confines. My suit jacket hung crookedly on my frame, and I felt the dull throb of a migraine beginning behind my eyes. I made myself a cup of tea, but it tasted like ash. The silence of my apartment, usually a balm, felt heavy and oppressive, echoing the hollow ache in my chest. A gentle knock at my door startled me. I hesitated, not wanting anyone to see me in such a disheveled state. But the knock came again, softer this time, more persistent. I pulled the door open, just a crack, to see Dorothy standing there. She was holding a small, vibrant potted succulent, its green leaves a striking contrast to the muted hallway. "Hey," she said, her voice quiet, a slight furrow in her brow. Her hazel eyes, usually so bright, held a look of gentle concern. "I saw you come in. You looked like you'd had a rough day. I just wanted to drop this off. Figured a little green might brighten things up." She offered the succulent, its ceramic pot warm in her hands. I took the plant, feeling the unexpected weight of her kindness.
Thank you, Dorothy.
It's really thoughtful." My voice was raspy, my throat tight with unspoken emotions. She didn't push. She simply stepped inside when I didn't close the door, closing it softly behind her. She moved with an easy grace, settling herself on the edge of my armchair. "You don't have to talk about it," she said, her voice a low murmur. "But if you want to, I'm here." And then, unexpectedly, the words spilled out. Not everything, not the deepest anxieties, but enough. The stalled project, the feeling of wasted effort, the sting of professional setback. I spoke haltingly at first, then with more ease, finding an unfamiliar comfort in her quiet presence. She didn't offer advice or platitudes. She just listened, her gaze steady, her empathy a palpable force in the room. She nodded occasionally, her eyes conveying a deep understanding, a shared acknowledgement of the unfairness of life sometimes. As I spoke, I felt a release, a subtle unburdening. It was a strange experience for me, someone who had always prided myself on handling my own emotional burdens. To let someone else in even a little felt both vulnerable and incredibly liberating. Her presence, her unwavering attention, was a balm to my raw nerves. When I finally trailed off, exhausted but feeling lighter, she simply reached out and gently squeezed my hand. A brief, comforting pressure. "It's tough when things don't go the way you plan," she said, her voice soft. "But you're strong, Karen. And talented. This isn't the end, just a detour." Her words, so simple, yet so profoundly supportive, resonated deep within me. I looked at her, truly looked at her. Her vivid hair, the subtle sparkle in her eyes, the gentle curve of her lips. She was a vibrant, chaotic force. Yes, but beneath that exterior was a depth of compassion I had never anticipated. Her presence wasn't just comforting, it was gently challenging the long-held emotional walls I had meticulously constructed over years. She was chipping away at my guarded nature, not with force, but with quiet, persistent kindness. As the evening deepened and the city lights began to twinkle outside my window, I felt a subtle sense of healing bloom within me. It wasn't that the project problems had disappeared, but the crushing weight of them had lessened. Dorothy's compassionate presence had created a space for vulnerability, a space where I could simply be, without having to be strong, without having to be perfect. And in that quiet, shared vulnerability, a new layer of connection was forged, stronger and deeper than any friendship I had known. It was a quiet beginning to a profound shift within my own heart. The emotional landscape between Dorothy and me had undeniably shifted. The quiet offering of the succulent, the raw vulnerability I had shown, and her compassionate response had laid down a new, deeper foundation. Our friendship, once cautiously navigated, now flowed with a natural ease. Her apartment, with its vibrant tapestries and overflowing bookshelves, and mine, with its minimalist elegance, often served as extensions of shared space. Dinners became a regular occurrence. Sometimes, she'd cook, filling my apartment with the rich, earthy scent of herbs and spices, a delightful contrast to my usual solitary, well-portioned meals. I, in turn, found myself experimenting with more complex recipes, surprising myself with a newfound enjoyment in the process. We'd talk for hours, discussions ranging from abstract art theories to the mundane details of our workdays, always punctuated by laughter and thoughtful silences. One evening, we were listening to one of her playlists, a carefully curated mix of indie rock and soulful blues, now at a comfortably modulated volume. She was sketching in a small notebook, her fingers moving with a practiced grace, while I, unusually, found myself simply observing, rather than reading or working. The soft lamplight illuminated the intricate silver rings on her fingers, the way her blue hair, now streaked with streaks of lavender, fell across her face as she bent over her drawing. Her profile was striking, a delicate line from her brow to her chin, her lips slightly parted in concentration. I noticed the small scar just above her left eyebrow, a faint mark that hinted at stories untold. The scent of her, that unique blend of subtle smoke and something floral, had become incredibly comforting. We began to actively rely on each other. A flat tire on my car meant an immediate offer of a ride from Dorothy, her beat-up but reliable sedan always at the ready. A looming creative block for her band's new song meant an invitation to my apartment, where she'd play chords on her acoustic guitar, her eyes searching mine for an honest reaction. I found myself admiring her spontaneity, her fearless embrace of life's vibrant chaos. She, in turn, seemed to appreciate my quiet strength, my ability to bring order and clarity to complex situations. The atmosphere between us grew increasingly charged with unspoken feelings. It was in the lingering touches, a hand resting on my arm for a moment too long when she emphasized a point, the gentle brush of her fingers against mine when passing a cup. It was in the sustained eye contact, moments where the air would thicken and the world outside our quiet bubble seemed to fade away. Every shared smile felt significant, carrying a profound emotional weight. I felt a magnetic pull towards her, an almost physical ache to be closer, to understand the depths of her vibrant spirit. Her energy was intoxicating, drawing me out of my structured shell, making me question the boundaries I had so carefully erected around my own emotions. I found myself analyzing her gestures, dissecting her words, searching for hidden meanings, for reciprocation of the feelings that were quietly blossoming within my own heart. It was a nervous, exhilarating tension, a beautiful, syncopated rhythm that made my own heart beat a little faster whenever she was near. The quiet hum of my carefully composed life was being overlaid by a melody I hadn't known I needed, a powerful, emotional undercurrent that promised something profound and entirely new. The evening began like many others, yet it carried an underlying hum of anticipation that felt distinct. Dorothy had finished a new song for her band, a powerful, raw piece that had moved me deeply when she'd first played an acoustic version for me. Tonight, she wanted to celebrate its completion, and I had, unusually for me, agreed to a quiet evening of toasts and conversation in her apartment. The air was filled with the subtle aroma of a light dinner she had prepared, mixed with the faint, familiar scent of her favorite incense. We sat on her plush, oversized rug, surrounded by scattered art supplies and records, a scene that had become comfortably familiar. The lights were dimmed, casting soft, warm glows from various lamps. A low, soulful jazz tune played softly from her turntable, a stark but pleasant contrast to her usual rock anthems. We talked about everything and nothing, her inspirations, my latest architectural designs, a quirky story about her childhood, my quiet reflections on the city. The conversation flowed effortlessly, punctuated by easy laughter and comfortable silences. As the hours drifted by and the wine in our glasses dwindled, the atmosphere grew richer, more intimate. We moved from the rug to her small, worn sofa, sitting closer than usual, our knees occasionally brushing. The jazz music wrapped around us like a warm blanket. Dorothy's hazel eyes, usually so bright and expressive, now held a soft, contemplative gaze as she spoke. She began to share a vulnerability I hadn't seen before, fragments of her past struggles, the fear that sometimes shadowed her bold exterior. I listened, my heart aching with a tenderness I rarely allowed myself to feel. "It's funny," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper, her gaze fixed on the flickering candle on her coffee table. "I used to think being loud, being seen, was the only way to be. But you showed me the strength in quiet, in precision." You saw something in me I didn't even know was there. My breath hitched. Her words, so honest, so direct, struck a chord deep within me. My structured world often valued restraint, but her raw honesty was a different kind of power. I found myself wanting to bridge the small gap between us, to reach out, to touch. She turned her head then, her eyes meeting mine. The jazz music swelled subtly in the background. The air thickened, charged with unspoken emotions, with all the shared glances, the lingering touches, the quiet understandings that had built up over the past weeks. Her gaze was intense, searching, holding a question that resonated with the yearning in my own heart. I saw a vulnerability in her eyes that mirrored my own. My composure, usually unyielding, wavered. My own fears and hopes, usually carefully contained, rushed to the surface. It was a moment suspended in time, everything else fading away, leaving only the two of us, bathed in the soft lamplight. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, she leaned in. I didn't move, couldn't move. My gaze was fixed on hers, my heart thrumming against my ribs. Her eyes fluttered closed, then mine as our lips met. It was a brief, gentle press, soft and uncertain, yet it spoke volumes. A whisper of burgeoning emotion, a question, a promise. It was quiet, a soft, tentative moment of connection, and in that instant, the world tilted slightly on its axis. When we drew back, the silence that followed was profound, heavy with the weight of what had just transpired. Our eyes reopened, meeting again, filled with a mix of surprise, exhilaration, and a deep, shimmering vulnerability. My heart still hammered, a frantic drumbeat against my chest. The profound emotional impact of that quiet kiss left me breathless, my mind reeling, a torrent of new, powerful feelings swirling within me. Everything felt different, irrevocably altered by that single, delicate touch. The morning after felt like navigating a landscape transformed overnight, familiar yet utterly altered. The memory of the kiss, soft and unexpected, was a quiet hum beneath the surface of my awareness. I woke with a jolt, the clarity of the previous evening's emotional crescendo settling upon me with a mixture of exhilaration and a familiar, unsettling trepidation. My carefully constructed emotional walls, breached so unexpectedly, now felt permeable, exposed. When I finally emerged from my apartment, coffee in hand, I almost collided with Dorothy in the hallway. She was heading towards her door, a half-eaten bagel in one hand, her blue hair a little wilder than usual. Our eyes met, and a flush instantly warmed my cheeks. "Morning," she said, her voice a little softer than usual, a tentative smile playing on her lips. She looked away briefly, then back, a hint of vulnerability in her hazel eyes. "Morning, Dorothy," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt, though my heart was doing a strange, fluttering dance in my chest. The air between us was thick with unspoken questions, with the lingering ghost of the previous night's intimacy. We stood there for a beat too long, an awkward silence stretching, before she finally murmured, "Well, I should probably get going."
Right.
"Me too," I agreed, and we parted ways, the delicate tension still hanging in the air. Later that week, the subtle shifts in our dynamic began to manifest as friction. We were discussing a new art installation she was helping a friend with, and I, ever the pragmatist, offered some logistical advice, pointing out potential structural flaws in the design. What I intended as helpful insight, she perceived as criticism. "Karen, I know you see everything in terms of blueprints and load-bearing walls," she said, her voice edged with frustration, her usual easygoing demeanor replaced by a defensive sharpness. "But sometimes art isn't about perfect angles. It's about feeling, about breaking the rules. And sometimes breaking the rules results in collapse, Dorothy," I retorted, my own frustration bubbling to the surface. My voice, usually calm, was now taut. "There's a reason for structure. It's not about stifling creativity, it's about making sure it stands." Her jaw tightened. "My creativity isn't going to collapse. Thank you very much." She turned away, a dismissive gesture, that stung more than her words. A heavy silence descended, colder than any argument we'd had before. Our differences, once a source of fascination and playful banter, now felt like a chasm. The silence felt sharper, more profound, because of the intimacy we had shared. I retreated to my apartment, a knot of disappointment forming in my stomach. Was this it? Had that kiss, instead of bringing us closer, merely highlighted our irreconcilable differences? But the silence, unlike the noise that had originally driven me to her door, was not something I could tolerate for long. The quiet understanding we had built, the vulnerability we had shared, felt too precious to simply abandon. I reflected on our conversation, on her passion, on my own tendency to prioritize logic over intuition. My words, while factually correct, had lacked sensitivity. A few hours later, I found myself knocking on her door again, a quiet, hesitant rap. It opened almost immediately. She stood there, her shoulders a little slumped, her eyes looking tired. "Hey," I began, my voice soft. I came back to apologize. My delivery was too blunt. I didn't mean to dismiss your creative vision. Sometimes my architectural brain takes over. I offered a small, tentative smile. And I really do admire your ability to see beyond the lines. She looked at me, a flicker of surprise, then relief, passing over her features. "And I'm sorry too," she confessed, her voice equally gentle. I got defensive. "You're right, sometimes I do need to think about the practicalities. It's just, I value your opinion so much, and it felt like you were tearing it down." We stood there, the tension slowly easing between us. Our gazes met, holding a deeper understanding now. We were different, yes, but those differences, when navigated with care and honesty, could also be our strength. We talked it through, not just the project, but the underlying fear that our contrasting natures might pull us apart. We were learning to communicate, to truly listen, to bridge the gaps with patience and empathy. And in that reconciliation, in the quiet effort of working through our first real disagreement, our bond solidified, deepened by the understanding that real connection wasn't about perfect harmony, but about learning to dance through the syncopated rhythms of two distinct hearts. The small disagreement, rather than severing our budding connection, had unexpectedly strengthened it, like metal forged in fire. It was a testament to our growing capacity for vulnerability and honest communication. We moved forward, no longer just friends skirting the edges of something more, but as two people choosing to consciously explore the profound emotional landscape that had opened between us. Our relationship, once a hesitant melody, now began to swell into a rich, complex harmony. We officially acknowledged our romantic feelings, a quiet, profound conversation where words felt almost superfluous, the truth shining brightly in our eyes. It was less a declaration and more an affirmation of what had already been quietly understood between us for weeks. I found myself shedding layers of guardedness I hadn't even realized I possessed. Dorothy, in turn, seemed to find a new grounding, a quiet anchor in my steady presence. Our contrasting personalities, once a source of both fascination and occasional friction, now felt like perfectly interlocking pieces. My quiet introspection was beautifully balanced by Dorothy's vibrant expressiveness. Where I would meticulously plan, she would spontaneously inspire, often pulling me into unexpected adventures, a late-night drive to see the city lights from a new vantage point, an impromptu picnic in the park, a visit to a quirky art gallery I would never have discovered on my own. She brought color and wildness to my ordered world, gently coaxing me to experience life with more abandon. In return, I offered her a sense of calm and stability she admitted she often craved. When her creative process felt chaotic or overwhelming, my logical mind could help her structure her thoughts, gently guide her through the maze of ideas. I became her quiet sounding board, her steady presence in the face of artistic uncertainty. She began to see the beauty in structure, in the carefully considered lines that created enduring forms, while I started to appreciate the raw, untamed power of emotional expression. Our apartments, once separate entities, truly became shared spaces. My minimalist design, once a reflection of my inner world, now held splashes of Dorothy's vibrant life, a small, brightly painted canvas propped on my bookshelf, a collection of unique, hand-fired mugs in my kitchen, a wild bouquet of wildflowers she'd gathered from a morning walk gracing my dining table. Her apartment, while still a vibrant kaleidoscope, now had small, subtle touches of my influence, a more organized stack of records, a neatly arranged set of design magazines, a carefully chosen piece of modern pottery. We became each other's anchors, offering unwavering support through life's complexities. When a major architectural competition consumed my every waking moment, Dorothy was there, a steady supply of strong coffee and quiet encouragement, always reminding me to eat, to breathe, to step away for a moment. When her band faced a difficult decision about their future, I was the one she turned to, my calm logic helping her navigate the emotional currents. I often found myself reflecting on the journey, marveling at the transformation within me. Karen, the woman who once prided herself on her self-sufficiency and emotional containment, was now openly leaning on another. Dorothy had helped me shed old anxieties, not through grand gestures, but through consistent kindness, unwavering presence, and an intuitive understanding of my unspoken needs. She had shown me that vulnerability wasn't a weakness, but a profound strength, and that love wasn't about finding someone who mirrored your exact image, but someone whose differences illuminated parts of yourself you never knew existed. My heart, once a carefully guarded fortress, now beat with a joyous, open rhythm, harmonizing beautifully with hers. Our love story, born from the most discordant of beginnings, continued to unfold with a beautiful, evolving rhythm. Each day was a new chord in our shared melody, sometimes soft and lingering, sometimes vibrant and bold. We had built a life together, not just within the walls of our apartments, but in the intricate spaces between our two distinct souls, a connection that felt both deeply rooted and endlessly expansive. I often found myself in quiet moments, a cup of tea in hand, gazing out my window at the city skyline and reflecting on the journey. It was still unbelievable, almost surreal, to think back to that time when the very sound of Dorothy's existence had driven me to the brink of my composure. The anger, the frustration, the meticulous self-preservation, they all seemed like echoes from a distant past, belonging to a different Karen entirely. Dorothy, the vibrant, chaotic rock and roll girl, had not only quieted the literal noise in my life, but had brought a profound, resonant calm to the tumultuous landscape of my own heart. She had taught me the value of spontaneity, the joy of letting go of rigid plans, and the beauty in imperfection. My world, once defined by precise angles and predictable routines, had gained a rich, unpredictable texture. I still cherished my quiet moments, my architectural designs, my structured approach to problem-solving, but now they existed alongside impromptu road trips, late-night jam sessions, and colorful splashes of paint in unexpected corners of our shared spaces. And I, in turn, had offered her a quiet haven, a steady presence amidst the often turbulent currents of her creative life. She often said I was her anchor, the one who helped her navigate the practicalities of her dreams, grounding her without ever stifling her boundless spirit. She found comfort in my stillness, a balance to her own vibrant energy. We were a symphony of contrasts, each element enhancing the other, creating something richer and more complete than either of us could have been on our own. Our love wasn't a destination reached, but an ongoing journey, a continuous conversation between two evolving souls. There were still moments of friction, of course, small echoes of our initial clash of personalities. But now, they were met with understanding, with empathy, with a quiet confidence that we could always find our way back to each other, our individual rhythms sinking back into a harmonious whole. We had learned to communicate not just with words, but with glances, with quiet gestures, with the profound unspoken language that only two deeply connected hearts can share. As I watched the city lights begin to twinkle, a sense of profound gratitude washed over me. The woman who had once been the source of my sleepless nights had become the keeper of my dreams. The connection we shared was a testament to the unexpected beauty found when one opens their heart to something entirely new, to someone entirely different. Our future stretched before us, unwritten, full of unknown melodies and unforeseen challenges, but I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that we would face it all, together. Our story was an open chord, resonating with love, growth, and the beautiful, harmonious intertwining of two lives that had, against all odds, found their perfect rhythm.